I'm joined remotely via Zoom by Susan Harlow and Joanne Winter, co-artistic directors, along with Amy Proser, the Youth Arts Program Coordinator for Word Performing Arts Company. Thanks for being here, Susan, Joanne, and Amy, given our remote sequestering. I wanted to start with giving the audience a little background on Word for Word and your relationship with zSpace. So Joanne, can you share with the audience what that's like?
Sure. So Word for Word Performing Arts Company is a professional theater company based in San Francisco. And we are unique in that we take short stories and theatricalize them. We use short stories as a text instead of a play script. And we don't change the text at all. We keep all of the narrative of it and the he says and she says, but all of that is fully theatricalized. So the actors speak the narrative as they're doing it. It's like the characters are talking about it as it's happening to them. And it's the most difficult thing to describe because everybody thinks you're script in hand with music stands, but it's actually quite active. And we are a program of zSpace, which is a developmental laboratory for New American Theater. And we joined zSpace at its beginning, 7, 8 years ago. And Sue and I were artists in residence. zSpace was started by David Dower as an offshoot of the Z Collective, which was a theater company at the time. And his idea was to give theater artists a place and time and funding to just explore theatrical ideas that they had without the onus of production. So you didn't have to say, oh, in 5 weeks I have to put this on a stage. You could explore and make mistakes and discover and then take it to production if you wanted to. Or maybe you decide, no, this isn't a good idea. Sue and I at this same time had been talking about starting Word for Word in San Francisco. So we approached David, we said, we have this idea to create this literature-based theater company. And that's where our core company, the Charter Group, came from primarily. A few people joined a few years later, but that core company has been meeting every month or practically every month for the last 27 years. And we've toured all over California and the Western United States. And we've been very fortunate to be able to tour to France for the last over 20 years. And we also have an arts education program where we take students through this process of taking a short story or a poem and theatricalizing it. And zSpace is also a place. It's a theater in Project Artaud in the Mission in San Francisco. And in addition to our productions and other productions that zSpace develops and produces, we rent this space out and bring all kinds of diverse theatrical companies from all over the world and all over the country, and dance troupes, musical groups, So we have a very rich life amongst zSpace, and that's kind of the overview.
Thank you. That was great. So Susan, can you talk about how COVID-19 has impacted the production of Word for Word?
Yes. Well, the first thing that happened was we had this fantastic tour of France planned. As Joanne mentioned, we go every year. We have special funding that we receive to do that funding whose purpose is French-American amity through cultural events. So we were going to bring Retablos, the short chapters from Octavio Solis's memoir, Life Lived Along the Border. This had been in production at zSpace, and we had to close the show just 4 performances before it was due to be over. So we were fortunate that we got to have most of the run. But B, we were supposed to bring this show to France, and we were so excited about this. And some of the cast had never been to Europe, some had been, but everybody everywhere was pretty thrilled about this. And that was one of the hardest, I think probably the hardest thing in my career, was when I had to go to the cast, and Italy had just been quarantined. And I had spoken to friends in France, and they said, you could come, but I don't know if you could get out. And so I had to go and talk to the cast about this. And, I wept. It was really, really difficult. But I said, we are not canceling this. We're postponing this because the show is built to tour. And it's all there packed in bags, costumes cleaned, everything there, ready to go when we are able to go again. The second was that we had a show planned and a bunch of our off-the-page staged readings also planned for this summer, and we're postponing that. And of course, the question is, yeah, that's next up for us. So the Z team has been talking a lot. Our technical guys and staff are talking a lot about how we can make that work for us when we can make that work for us.
And so, Susan and Joanne, over the 20 plus years, what do you feel like has been the largest impact of Word for Word on our community?
Well, I think it's the stories that we pick, because we're performing short stories. It's a little bit different than a play. And so it's an unusual form, and people become captivated by it, and they get excited about it. So it also leads people to read the books themselves or to look for other work by that writer. So I would speak first to what we just closed, the story that I mentioned, Retablos. Octavio Solis, who's a renowned playwright and who also coincidentally directed some of our very early stories, grew up in El Paso. And so this is his memoir. And we took 14 of the chapters in his memoir and put them on the stage with a wonderful cast. And we were really lucky. We had there was a woman at Twitter, a Latinx woman, who wanted to have a Latinx tech night for people who were in the tech world. And so she rallied all her friends and her family, and they came, and we did a talk back after the show with them, and it was just amazing. People were speaking from their hearts and talking about their own personal experiences with immigration, etc., and talking with the cast. And it was just really a moment, one of those moments in theater that you never want to forget, because it was so heartfelt and people were speaking so openly, and it showed you the power of theater to be able to tell stories on stage that other people can relate to and talk about. So that's the first that I would mention. And then Joanne, you were going to...
Well, last year we did a production of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is not a short story, but an epic poem, as everybody probably knows. But one of our core members, Delia McDougall, had for many, many years wanted to bring this to the stage. And we always conceived of it as an epic production to match the epic nature of the poetry. And last year we were able to make that happen thanks to help from a lot of people. Delia McDougall directed the production, and she saw the poem through the lens of the climate crisis. There's a lot of connection there if you look at it. It's about, man trying to have control over nature and failing dismally. So we were able to not only have this amazingly beautiful production with an incredible cast and just beautifully designed, but we also took our lobby at Z Space, which is quite large, and we did a lot of informational displays about the climate crisis and what people could do to help with that. So that was a really exciting thing that, again, was our goal to have an impact on the community, to not only move them with a theatrical production, but to have them go away with some things to think about and to possibly do.
Right. Then we also were able to do, by local favorite Amy Tan, we were able to have a production of Immortal Heart. And that, too, was reaching a community. I remember at one point we had a blessing. And we were really able to bring people together for those two stories as well. So we could go on and on, but I think those are, Joanne, you have...
Well, I mean, every writer that we've chosen, there's some sort of story about the connection that we've made there, like Sue says. And, one of the early stories that Octavio Solis directed was a story by Greg Saris called Slaughterhouse, from his book Grand Avenue, which is about marginalized people, present day in Sonoma County and Santa Rosa. And when we did that production, we invited Greg to come, and he came to see the show, and we sort of, we fell in love with each other. And that inspired Greg to invite us to come up and be part of their summer camp for Native youth, because they didn't have a lot of arts programming. So for the last 3 years, this will be our third summer. Now, of course, this summer, we're having to go virtual with it. And Amy Presser, who is our youth arts coordinator, youth arts being our arts education program, has been just on the massive learning curve of, how to bring this onto Zoom. And Amy, why don't you tell us about that?
Great. So I just wanted to start by saying that when the shelter in place came down, we were between school residencies. So we had this really nice lull time where we could really check in with our teaching artists, all of whom are gig workers who go from teaching job to acting job and were deeply, deeply affected by COVID. So we were able to spend about a month checking in with them, checking in with our grant organizations to make sure that we could continue paying our teaching artists, even if they weren't able to teach in the schools. We had to cancel one of our school residencies. So that was really lovely to have that time to focus on them. But as Joanne said, we're now moving 6 weeks of summer camp online for the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. It's going very well. We have 9 incredible teaching artists who are going to teach a 4th through 8th grade program, and then 9 other teaching artists who are going to teach a teen program. So yeah, we're learning everything we can about Zoom. We've shortened our day to 3 hours instead of 6 hours. And we've had to really alter our curriculum from putting on one of Greg Sarris's stories, to teaching a variety of theater skills. And the last thing I'll say is that I just heard from Chairman Sarris that he's working with the Smithsonian, and they are documenting how Native people are transitioning during this period from live education to virtual education. And Chairman Sarris is very excited to use our camp as an example of that transition. So we're really honored to be part of that study and conversation.
And then I think finally, just to wrap up, how can people get engaged with, Word for Word and support your efforts to keep live theater going in the Bay Area?
Well, you can go to our website, which is www.zspace.org, and there is a donate button, and all of that money will go to support the various artists, actors, directors, designers, teaching artists, dancers, and our, hourly staff that is not able to work right now because we don't have any shows on. All of those people need support, and we would really appreciate anything anybody can help with right now. zspace.org.
And I want to thank, all 3 of you for being a part of our show today. And we'll get the word out in the show on all the social media and how people can follow Word for Word and the youth program. And please stay safe and healthy out there as we go through this new and strange time.
Thank you, George.
George, you too.
Thank you so much.